All right, so welcome everyone. I know it's a crazy week to have a session, but I was able to listen to Robin's presentation on inclusive practices last week, and the information, a lot of it has kind of come to fruition to where now we've got a timeline and we've got more information, and I felt like it was really important for you to get this information before everybody leaves for summer. I know most of you that I see who are here don't get to leave for the summer, but sometimes this impacts what you're doing in the summer and what you're sending teachers to and those things. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Robin as she talks to us about inclusive practices.
Great, thanks, Julie. I am going to go through a short slide deck pretty quickly. I do want you to feel free to ask questions, put them in the chat, just ask. I am hoping that I have built into these slides the stuff that you will need. I do want to share those slides with you too, so that if you need them for any purpose, you are more than welcome to use them. So I am right now getting that link, and I'm going to put it in the chat. So again, feel free to use those in any way that would be helpful to you. All right. Let's see if my sharing ability is working very well today. How's that? Do you have the big black box over on the side? Do I need to minimize? No? Is it okay? Looking okay?
We're good.
All right, great. Good. Okay, so my name is Robin Stripling. I work in the Office of Special Education here at ADE, and I do just want to share briefly with you where we're headed and a little bit of the why we're going in this direction. We always start with our vision and mission. It is our vision that we lead the nation in student-focused inclusive education. We in our office did add that word inclusive, but we did get the blessing of Secretary Key from that, because we do want every student to be prepared for college, career, and community engagement. So I do want to start with just a tiny bit of data in this piece. Oh, nope, Rob, sorry. There is that desired outcome. We do want all students to be considered general education students first, and we would like to do away with the two separate silos, that special ed silo, the general education silo. And I know that in some of the schools who are on this call, you don't have those two silos. You are working together beautifully. Not every district in the state has made that shift yet. So we hope that you will be those forces of change and help other districts as they go in this direction. Now let's dig into a little piece of data. So typically when I share this, people are really excited because we have in Arkansas the highest graduation rate in the nation for students with disabilities, with IEPs. So that sounds just fabulous. We graduate more students with IEPs than any other state in the union. But then when we join that with achievement data, the picture gets a little murky. What you see here are the difference between students without IEPs and students with IEPs on the NAEP, the National Assessment for Educational Progress. And you can see here how much better our students without IEPs fare on that NAEP assessment. And this isn't the percentage of students who are proficient. These are the percentages of students who are at or above basic. So you would think if we have this super high graduation rate for students with IEPs, we would also have a super high achievement rate for students with IEPs. But as you can see, that is not the case. We also put that together with the fact that 80 to 85% of students with IEPs have disabilities that are not correlated to IQ, which is kind of surprising to a lot of people. I know that when I first read this in a book that we use here in our office, the book is called Yes, We Can, I was a little surprised. So we dug into national data and found this to be true. Let me share with you a little bit of Arkansas data though. These are the eligibility categories for students with IEPs in our state. So you'll notice here the first category are students with specific learning disabilities. And of the students who have IEPs, 30% have specific learning disabilities. And in our eligibility document, it says that for a student with a specific learning disability, He appears to have average or above average intelligence. So we would certainly say that that SLD category would have students who would not have that cognitive disability. Then you have speech and language. And many of those students are our students with articulation issues. They are not students who have intellectual disabilities, or they would have been found eligible under a different category. So the vast majority of those students have no cognitive impairment. And then we have other health impairment, which at least for me, I always think of ADHD or ADD, those students with attention deficits in that 19%. Again, by and large, no cognitive impairment. So you can tell here our three largest categories, for the most part, those students do not have cognitive disabilities. But then that intellectual disability, that fourth category, you can see there that 12% of our students in the state have an intellectual disability. The thing that was shocking to us and very disturbing to us is that that percentage is double the national percentage. Nationally, 6% of students with IEPs have an intellectual disability. So that made us step back and think, well, we know that's not our students. We know that we don't have twice as many students in our state with intellectual disabilities than we have in the nation. We really believe that our identification tools, our evaluation components probably are not measuring what we need them to measure. So we are, we think, over-identifying students with intellectual disabilities. They may have a different disability, but not this particular one. So we in our office are digging into that. But then we started thinking about this piece of data. 76% of our students with IEPs live in poverty. So when these students who have grown up in poverty hit kindergarten, they are showing up in our kindergartens without the language experiences, the vocabulary that their peers have. And then we give them evaluation components that are really heavy in vocabulary and language. So we think that that may be one reason why our intellectual disability percentage is so high, because the tools we are using are not sensitive to these particular students. We did dig into IDEA to see what IDEA says about this inclusive work, because we keep hearing, especially seeing on social media, that we have to provide the full continuum. And we in our office completely agree with that. We do believe there should be the full continuum. So I'll let you read this and see if there's anything in there that seems a little surprising to you. I don't know about you, but for most folks, it's this last paragraph. This supplementary services, such as resource room, to be provided in conjunction with regular class placement. And in the schools where I have worked, resource was a class. It was a core content class, maybe math, maybe ELA, sometimes science or social studies, but it was not in conjunction with regular class placement. Notice the paragraph above that, though. It does say that we should have instruction in regular classes or special classes. And those special classes are what we typically in Arkansas call self-contained. So we are not, in our office, we are not saying do away with all of your special education classes. That's not what we're saying. But what we do need to move toward is having that resource be a service provided in conjunction with regular class placement. We also dug into ESSA to see how we were doing with ESSA requirements, because we know ESSA says that students should not graduate with their IEP as their graduation plan, that is a lesser standard. So when we dug into what ESSA said, we found this, that regular high school diploma should be fully aligned with the state standards. So we kind of wondered what that meant about that full alignment. So we went to the graduation requirements for math, and we saw these 4 things: Algebra 1, geometry, and 2 other ADE approved math courses. Well, to see if this was aligned with our standards, we went to the standards document for Algebra 1. This is the first page of that particular document, and we found this statement about licensure. Please refer to the course code management system. So we did. We looked up Algebra 1 in the course code management system, and we found this. These are the people who are licensed to teach Algebra 1. We noticed pretty quickly that there were no special education licensure codes listed here. We also noticed that first bullet where it says ADE approved, because we know that our resource courses, those course codes for resource, are not ADE approved courses. So we're not meeting the licensure requirement to be fully aligned, and our courses are not ADE approved if they are resource courses. Because of those 2 federal laws, and because we wanted outcomes to be better for students with disabilities, we started working on trying to move in this direction of more inclusive education. This timeline was sent out, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, to special education directors. That went out some other ways as well. And you will notice here that for this current school year, this was when we were doing our trainings all around the state. For next year, we are asking schools to use that as a transition year to make a plan for moving forward. If your teachers need some training, that might be a good time to do that. And then in 23-24, we are recommending that students in 6th grade and lower have core instruction in those general education classes. We want to give students time to go up through your system in these inclusive classes before they hit high school. So this is 6th grade and lower. Then those students would roll up to 7th grade. They would roll up to 8th grade. And in 26-27, those 9th graders will need to actually meet the graduation requirements. That will again roll up 1 grade per year until it's all the way through high school. So let me pause here for just a moment and see if you have any questions. You can either unmute and just ask, or put them in the chat. I do have a few more things to share with you, but let's see if there are questions that are burning right now.
I have a question about minutes. Like if they go to their regular classroom for core instruction and get the instruction part, and then go to a resource room, to maybe get some extra help on that core instruction, with the time that they were in the regular classroom count in their minutes that we put on their IEP?
Well, it can, if they're getting special education services in that general education classroom. What you would really want to think about, though, would be what services does this child actually need? And whatever services the child needs, document that on the IEP, and you may need to adjust the minutes. Great. If the student doesn't need as many minutes, change that IEP, hold that meeting. It could be a phone or a Zoom call. Don't think because the student has, 250 minutes of math minutes per week that if he doesn't need that, you have to stick with that. Have that IEP meeting, discuss this with the parents, and see if that time needs to be changed. Any other questions? I do want to share with you too the actual document that was sent to the special ed directors. And I put the link to the slides in the chat, so you do have a link to this, because at the very bottom, there is a link to a feedback survey. And we are asking educators to complete that survey, give us that feedback that we need, perhaps share it with parents, whatever would be helpful to us as we move forward. We really would like to have that feedback from you. All right, just a quote that I wanted to share here. No studies conducted since the late 70s have shown an academic advantage for students with intellectual or other developmental disabilities educated in separate settings. Kind of a surprising statement for many folks. I do want to mention too that IDEA also addresses modifications, which are changing the grade level expectation. IDEA is really clear that a child should not be removed from education in that regular classroom just because the child needs modifications in the general education curriculum. Now, we don't want to modify unless it is absolutely necessary, because if we are lowering those grade level expectations or making that expectation less complex, that gap is going to grow larger for that child. So we don't want to do that unless it is absolutely necessary, but IDEA does make provision for that. Many of you probably know that we have been having an inclusive practices project for the last couple of years. We had 7 schools this past year, 4 the year before. And I want to share just a little bit of ACT Aspire data with you from these schools. We are eagerly anticipating the new ACT Aspire data. This is actually the data from last year. So this is one school. You can see that for students with IEPs, their weighted achievement increased, their ESSA score increased, and that growth score went up above that 80. And we always want to try to get students above that 80 if at all possible. A second school, this is for all students. They all increased using these inclusive practices. We sometimes hear, well, what about the kids without IEPs? That's gonna hurt them. Well, it certainly did not in this school. But looking at students with IEPs, they had almost an 8-point increase, in their ESSA school index score. And this was during that year of COVID when many schools were finding that their scores dropped. So then we get asked, okay, but how are we going to do this? What's it going to look like? And often we hear, well, we can't afford to co-teach in every class that needs a co-teacher in there. And you are exactly right. You probably can't. Co-teaching is a fabulous inclusive model, but it is just one model. We don't want people to think that they have to have 2 people in this classroom or in every classroom for the entire class period. If you can do that, great. I don't know of any schools who can. For co-teaching, these 2 people co-plan, co-instruct, and co-assess. Now, this model would probably work well in elementary, probably not so much in secondary. Ms. Friendly pulls these 4 students back to this back table. We color-coded these students to show that the students who are green are students with IEPs. So these would be all students with IEPs working with Ms. Friendly. Again, that wouldn't have worked well in the middle school where I taught, probably would work really well in an elementary school. Or Ms. Friendly might pull any student who is struggling. Here she has 1 green student, 1 student with an IEP, but it could be any student who is struggling. Now, for administrators, they often say, well, how are we going to pay Ms. Friendly? Ms. Friendly, who is a special ed teacher, can work with mixed groups if she is paid out of state and local funds. So what you would want to do is just make sure those special ed teachers who are working with these mixed groups are out of that pot of money and not your 6B funds. Use your 6B funds for the teachers who work solely with those students with IEPs. Now, this is one that I really think that we have to think about much, much more. Ms. Friendly is pulling these 4 students to her resource room. It's like kind of like speech therapy. These 4 students have the same skill deficit. So she is pulling them together to work on that skill deficit. She is not their provider of core instruction. The thing that you would want to make sure when these students are pulled to Ms. Friendly is that they are not missing initial instruction on those essential standards. They should never, ever be pulled out of core during the time when essential standards are being taught. Maybe you and your district have some dually certified people. Mr. Watson is a dually certified person, so he can provide that specially designed instruction within a general education classroom. So find out if you have those dually certified folks, because they will be very beneficial in your work in this direction. You could have Mr. Franks, who goes in and out of different classes based on student need. Again, paying him out of state and local funds. He would need to work very closely with these gen ed teachers to make sure he is in the right place at the right time, working with those students who are struggling. You may take advantage of peer-assisted learning strategies, and we even have an example on our website of how to document that on an IEP. If you're a fan of John Hattie says that this is a very positive influence on student achievement. It is positive for both the struggling student and the student who is providing the assistance. Vanderbilt University has modules that teach students how to work together. So something that we don't see often in classrooms, but maybe something you would want to explore. Now, this is a book that we have been digging into in our office to just try to think differently about how special education can look. IDEA also tells us that special education can be provided on behalf of the student with a disability, which means your gen ed teacher and your special ed teacher could work together to figure out what that student needs. This book provides several different types of service delivery models. They have an inclusion facilitator, 3 different kinds of those, also a consultant teacher and targeted support person. So thinking about that inclusive facilitator, it could be a building level person, really job embedded professional learning, which is the very best kind of professional learning. A member of the leadership team, a coaching role. This is not a person who is providing direct services to children. This is a person who works with the adults. Again, that can be documented on an IEP because it is that consultation with this person teaching that gen ed teacher how to provide supports that are needed. Could also be student specific. We typically, or the book typically thinks of this for your students with the most significant needs. This person works with that gen ed teacher to know how to provide those supports. Could also be a content specific. If you have a special educator who is really skilled in math, this could be something that your content specific person could, the services this person could provide. Or kind of a mixture of the two, that consultant teacher plus that targeted support. So this person would have some scheduled time with students and then other time that is collaborative with those teachers. We have these scenarios on our website with documentation showing how to document those things on an IEP. So if you have special educators who would like to see that, feel free to share that. This book is one that we have been using for some time now. Julie Schmidt has been in our state several times. She was at the summit. She's been at several conferences. One thing from this book, most special ed teachers should provide supplemental support, not core instruction. So we need to keep that in mind. We do have a website that has lots of information for you about this inclusive work. On the front, we do have that document that I shared that has the timeline. Down at the bottom, I hope I'm not making you seasick here, I'm sorry. We do have the links to our summer trainings so that you can see if there are any of those that you would like to send some of your staff to. We do ask that for these, that if at all possible, you send a team mix special ed and gen ed so we can start that collaborative work. Also, if these things fill up, we will book more. I think Julie will agree. We're pretty good about saying, sure, we'll do another day. So let us know if you need us to schedule some more days. We have information on our menu here: least restrictive environment, least dangerous assumption, which is a big thing in this work, universal design for learning, high leverage practices, the ways to meet the needs of students. That's where you'll find those scenarios and the information about peer assisted learning, related links, lots and lots of videos, and parent resources, because we know that parents are going to be curious about this work. Why are we going in this direction? We also have a page where we are linking mainly videos from teachers, from principals about this inclusive work. And we would love to have some from the Archboard area. We would love to have those to share. It's like there may be something in the chat. Let me see if I can get that up. Are there any suggestions for parents who do not want their child to be in an inclusion class, requesting small group resource class only? Well, one thing that you may want to consider is that currently they don't have to be in that inclusive setting. We truly feel it is best for students, but remember, with that timeline, you do have time to roll that up. However, I would encourage you to look at the links on that parents page. Let them see probably some of the research about outcomes for students who have had that inclusive education compared to students who have not. Because I think when they realize we're not taking supports away from children, we're asking the supports to look different. But I would go to that parent page and see if there's information there that might be helpful to the parents. We do have this quote as well, and I'll let you read that because I think that's really sums up why we're doing this work. All right, so I do want to take some questions. Before we do that, though, I just stuck this in here and I wanted to share this with you. This is a decision flow chart. We have, oh, let me scoot this over here. Now it's loading pretty slowly. Whoever's Wi-Fi I'm using is not being very friendly to me in here. It says loading for me. Can you see it? You can see it. There we go. Now I can see it. So it starts at the top here with thinking about that student's individual needs. The very next thing is not, where's the student going to get instruction? The next thing is, what are the goals for this student? What are those critical needs that we can address in IEP goals? From those goals, where will those services be provided? And then we've got this flow chart of yeses and nos. Can it be in gen ed with assistive technology and accommodations? Can it be in that classroom with in-classroom supports or with pull-out supports, pull-out intervention? Can the child be in gen ed with modifications to the curriculum? Maybe modifications in addition to in-classroom supports. And only when all of those have been answered no, would we go to that pull-out for core instruction. So just something to look at. It may give your teachers some conversation points thinking about those different supports that could be given in a general education class. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and see what questions you have or comments. Dr. Workman, did I put them all to sleep?
No, I assure you there will be questions, but like I said, this is just the beginning. So if you have questions, send them to me. I'll send them on to Robin, and we will just kind of build this together as we're going. Any other comments, or any of you, like Stephanie, I see you there. Can you share just kind of basically, when you're looking at elementary, what has helped you guys with those inclusive practices?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit. So we are pretty good in elementary. Let me just say that. It's the mindset shift, and we started years ago with that mindset shift that we didn't want kids to be pulled out of core instruction to get their special ed resource minutes. It helped us moving to our proud time, which is our intervention time, and then being creative and starting with a child's schedule that has an IEP, and then kind of making the schedule fit around them a little bit. So kind of a backwards way of planning. Every district has issues right now, but our issue is going to be more secondary. And so that's where we're looking at the hot spots. And we did, when we did annual reviews for our 5th graders, they're moving to 6th grade next year. And some of our 6th graders moving to 7th grade, and some of our 7th graders moving to 8th grade. We really tried to analyze it in a holistic piece and say, okay, where can we cut now? And what can we do with those? Because again, our system had resource, some kids, in a 50-minute resource class, just like Robin was talking about for secondary. And so we also have an intervention time, in middle school, junior high, and high school. So where can we use that time for those and pull those kids during that time, kind of like what Robin was talking about, like have them in core instruction, and then during their intervention time, pull them in there with a sped teacher and have their resource time during that time. So just trying to be creative, thinking outside the box in that aspect. And so we just try to take baby steps and really take it student by student. And we were able to transition several kids for this past end of the year. And so they'll start next year with being in the core content and then being pulled during that intervention time for their resource. So we'll see how that goes. I love it. I'm a believer of it. I think it's been a long time coming. And so I'm a full support of it. And so I think that's just where I think every district's going to be different, and every district's going to find their hot spots and their potholes. But for us, it's definitely secondary right now. And we're just making some changes and slowly moving into that transition year next year. And I was excited. We got to take several kids out of 50-minute resource. They didn't need it, and so we're excited about it.
Stephanie, can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Okay, because we're kind of in the same thing, and I had the same mindset with, do we use our RTI time to get these extra minutes? Because pretty much we're all inclusion now, but where do we pick up the extra time?
Yeah.
So when you're saying, are those students getting basically 1 day a week with the resource teachers, or how many days? Because, when we have 2 resource teachers, I'm trying to mathematically put it in my head how many minutes.
Yeah. Most of the kids that we were able to transition, most of them still have at least 3 days. Of course, we were able to increase our time for our intervention time, because it used to be just 30 minutes per day for our, and so we got real creative with our secondary schedule this past year because of gaps in learning. And so we have actually 45 minutes for intervention time now. And so that really helped our cause, because most of our kids, they could have 2 to 3 days of resource during that intervention time and be able to get plenty of time with the resource teacher. So I don't know if that helps you or not, but it may just, you may have kids, Michael, that they may need it, 4 days a week, so that is going to be a creative scheduling nightmare a little bit until you can reduce some of the minutes. We did reduce some of our kids' minutes significantly, because we weren't, their data showed when we were analyzing their data and everything, that they didn't need that 50-minute resource every day. So we were able to reduce that. So that might be a starting point for you guys, is to look at how many resource minutes you're giving. Again, like Robin said, we didn't want to just go, oh yeah, you don't need any resource. That would have been a PR nightmare and a parent nightmare. And so we just started kind of baby stepping into that. But with our intervention time period going to 45 minutes, that did help us with that cause.
Right,
and I'll tell you too, one thing that we have heard too is for schools to start with their student needs what that individual student needs and grouping those students together by that common need, even if that means crossing grade level lines. Because you may have these students, if it's elementary, you may have a second grader and a third grader, and maybe even a fourth grader who have the same needs, and grouping them together is better use of everybody's time, right? And then building the schedule around that, like Stephanie said. We are going to be digging a little bit into that this summer in our summer PD. We have some schedules that we're going to be looking at. We have several scheduling resources that we will be sharing with folks as well. And here at ADE, we have folks who are building an inclusion toolkit that hopefully will have some helpful hints as well. But I think what Stephanie said is exactly right. Just starting with that intervention time is a great start. And I love that you were able to go to 45 minutes for that intervention time. That's really, I think, a great step in the right direction for sure.
Any other questions? I'm putting the sessions Robin is talking about. Learning for All is the first one. It's June the 13th. What is the second one called, Robin? Is it also Learning for All?
It is, and it focuses much more on executive functioning skills, those that, especially for those kids with ADHD and specific learning disabilities. That's going to be a key piece that sometimes isn't addressed as much as we would like for it to be.
Okay, I'm gonna look for that one. I know we have that in July, I believe.
Yeah, it should be on that Inclusive Practices webpage. It's down at the bottom there too. So
yeah,
maybe they can have that there as well.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions before we sign off? Okay.
Well,
I
thank you for the invitation. Thanks. It was great visiting with you today. And thank you for being so understanding with my schedule.
No, thank you for doing this. And thank you who jumped on. I know it's last week of school and things are crazy, but we just want to make sure that you have the information so you can make good decisions. So, all right.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks.